In a quiet room, an old clock ticked loudly. My husband John was glued to the TV, ignoring me completely. I felt fed up with all the problems we'd had over the years. John broke the silence, sneering at me. I told him firmly, "I'm leaving." He mocked me, saying I couldn't survive without him. But his words only made me more determined. I couldn't take his neglect and his mom's meddling anymore. It was time to leave and take charge of my life. "I can handle it," I said confidently, standing up. Even though I was nervous about what was next, I felt strong. John's mom, who had been living with us for a while, walked in and saw my packed bags. "Leaving already?" she sneered, thinking I couldn't handle their family issues. I ignored her and grabbed my bags, heading for the door. John just sat there, saying, "You'll be back. You can't do this alone." As I stepped out of the house, a feeling of freedom washed over me. The evening air was refreshing, lifting my spirits. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. For 2 decades, I'd been playing the role of John's obedient wife, feeling more like a convenience than a partner. My son, Elias, was the only source of happiness, but even he couldn't fill the void in my heart. John's mom made things worse with her constant criticism and manipulation. Finding a small, peaceful apartment was a relief. It became my safe space where I could think without judgment. I ignored calls and messages from John and his mom, who begged and threatened me. I was determined to stand my ground and move forward. My coworkers at the library, where I'd worked for a long time, supported me. They had seen how I'd been struggling and were happy to see me finding my strength again. Surrounded by books and understanding friends, I started to feel like myself again and began to believe in a brighter future. While I was settling into my new life, Elias called me, sounding worried. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. I reassured him, feeling calm for the first time in years. "Yes, Elias, I'm doing better than ever." But then he told me about the problems at home. My decision to leave hadn't gone down well. John had turned to drinking, and his mom wouldn't stop blaming me for leaving. I pushed away the guilt, reminding myself that they needed to respect my decisions. Elias hesitated but then expressed his support for me prioritizing my happiness. Ending the call, I realized this was just the beginning of proving myself to John and his mother, who had underestimated me for too long. It was time they saw I wasn't the obedient woman they thought I was. My journey to self-discovery and independence had only just begun. In my quiet new home, I reflected on the 28 years with John. What started as a promising relationship had soured over time. John's charm and our shared dreams once seemed perfect, but he became more focused on himself, neglecting our family. Elias's birth didn't bring us closer, it highlighted our growing distance. John thought providing money was enough, leaving me to handle the emotional support. His mother, Ariana, was always there, criticizing my parenting. She'd say I was spoiling Elias, insisting John never needed that kind of care. Despite her comments, I focused on raising Elias well. He grew into a thoughtful and independent man, a bright spot in our tense home. Things reached a breaking point when Ariana moved in without asking, claiming she was lonely. Her presence was suffocating. She criticized everything from my cooking to my clothes, hinting that John could have chosen a better partner. This new phase of my life was all about breaking free from years of control and finding myself again, a journey I was just beginning. Ariana's constant criticisms were hard to ignore, but what really shook me was discovering John's deception. I stumbled upon bank statements one day that revealed large amounts of money being spent from our joint account. It turned out this money was being wasted on Ariana's gambling addiction and John's secret indulgences. Whenever I tried to confront them about it, it led to heated arguments, with John always taking his mother's side. "She's my mom, Stella. She needs this," he'd insist, dismissing my concerns. The final straw came when I overheard them plotting to take full control of our finances, pushing me aside and leaving me powerless in my own home. That's when I realized I couldn't keep living under their control. The day I decided to leave, I promised myself I'd make them understand the pain they caused. My plan was simple but powerful, to challenge their egos and their control. I started by legally separating our finances, which shocked John. "What are you doing?" he demanded on the phone. "I'm protecting myself, something I should have done a long time ago," I replied calmly but firmly. Ariana's reaction was even more dramatic. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you," she screamed when she found out. But I didn't let it faze me. The time of me being submissive was over. Now I was setting my own rules, beginning their reckoning. After I took control of my finances, things got chaotic. John and Ariana showed their true colors through their anger. Their attempts to intimidate me with angry phone calls didn't work. "You think you're smart, Stella," John sneered over the phone. "You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back." "Not a chance, John. I won't let you manipulate me anymore," I shot back, standing my ground. Ariana's threats were even harsher. "You'll regret this, Stella. You've ruined our family." "There was no family to ruin, Ariana. It was all fake," I countered. Despite their threats, I felt free. The fear that used to control me was gone, replaced by a determination for justice. It was time for them to face the consequences. I started by reaching out to old friends and telling them about the lies and manipulation John and Ariana had put me through. My honest revelation spread quickly, tarnishing their once spotless reputations. John, who always cared about his social standing, was embarrassed. "How could you do this to me?" he asked me, shocked. "You did it to yourself," I replied calmly. "I'm just telling the truth." Ariana faced the community's disapproval too. "You've made us outcasts," she accused, seeing it as a fight. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "No, Ariana, this isn't a fight. It's about being responsible for your actions," I told her. Seeing their social circles fall apart showed how powerful the truth can be. John's supporters distanced themselves, wary of his damaged reputation, while Ariana lost influence as her gambling problem and manipulative tactics were exposed. But I didn't stop at just exposing them socially. I knew their weak spot was their finances. With the help of a good lawyer, I fought for my fair share of our joint assets. Ariana's debts from gambling and John's mishandling of money were brought to light. The legal battles were tough, but I stayed strong. Their lies were no match for the truth, and I won a significant victory in court. When the judge ruled in my favor, I could see the defeat in John and Ariana's faces. This win meant more than just money. It showed that I was morally right. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," John said, sounding defeated. "No, John, you destroyed our family long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces," I replied, leaving the courtroom feeling free for the first time in years. I was filled with hope for a future without the weight of my past. After the court ruling, I started rebuilding my life with the assets that were rightfully mine. Stepping away from John and Ariana's influence, they couldn't believe the extent of their downfall. This was the start of a new chapter for me, one of independence and self-discovery, ready to embrace whatever came my way. The crumbling of John and Ariana's facades was just the beginning of my journey to rediscover myself and pursue real happiness and freedom. One evening, John called in a fit of desperation. "You can't just change our lives like this, Stella," he pleaded over the phone. "I'm just taking back what's rightfully mine," I replied firmly. "Maybe you should have thought about the consequences before betraying my trust." Ariana, however, took a sneakier approach. She tried to turn family members against me, painting herself as the victim. "You're tearing our family apart, Stella," she accused me when we bumped into each other at the grocery store. "This family was broken long before I left," I replied, refusing to show any sign of distress. I embraced my new freedom, enjoying the ability to control my own life. I cut off their access to me by changing my phone number and found comfort in volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who have faced similar struggles. But my fight for justice wasn't over yet. I found out Ariana planned to challenge the court's decision, hoping to get money for her gambling habit. "You won't win, Stella. I'll make sure you pay," she threatened in a message sent through a relative. In defiance, I strengthened my legal defenses, prepared to counter any challenge she brought forward. The person who once avoided conflict had become a determined advocate for her own rights. Meanwhile, John was crumbling under the pressure. His once spotless reputation was now tarnished, affecting his career. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," he admitted during a moment of reflection. "You brought this on yourself, John." "I just exposed the truth," I replied. As time passed, I watched as their seemingly stable lives fell apart. Ariana's attempt to overturn the court's decision failed, leaving her in financial and social ruin. John's professional life continued to decline, his reputation irreparably damaged. However, I didn't feel any joy in watching their downfall. Though it was an important part of reclaiming myself, it didn't bring me satisfaction. My journey was about healing and finding myself, far beyond their punishment. Regaining my independence and self-respect was a big step, but the wounds from neglect and emotional abuse were still healing. As I rebuilt my life, my main goal was to find inner peace and happiness. My journey was transformative, leading me out of the darkness of my past. I became stronger and more resilient. My story wasn't about revenge, but about freedom, a celebration of the human spirit's ability to overcome challenges. Months had gone by since the court ruled in my favor, but the effects lingered. John and Ariana had drifted from their social circles, shadows of their former selves. Then Elias visited unexpectedly with troubling news. Dad lost his job and his drinking has gotten worse. Grandma lost everything to gambling. They're selling the house, he said, the weight of his words palpable. My heart ached for Elias. Despite the distance, family ties tugged at my emotions. Did we do the right thing? Elias wondered quietly. I reassured him, though with a heavy heart, that we stood up for what was right. They made their choices. I didn't find satisfaction in John and Ariana's downfall. Instead, it reminded me of the importance of living with integrity and respecting others. In the following weeks, rumors spread about the sale of their house, signaling the end of their decline. John struggled to find work because of his damaged reputation, and Ariana was isolated as her addiction became known. One evening, I ran into John during a walk. He looked like a different person, defeated. There's nothing to say, he finally said, defeated. This brief encounter was powerful. It showed how much our lives had changed because of the choices we made. It was here that I found true happiness, peace, and a sense of self that couldn't be shaken.
My mother-in-law, Catherine, said some harsh things when we found out my husband would be moving abroad. She took away our house, leaving me and my daughter with nowhere to go. Feeling lost, I went to the park with my 2-year-old. Out of nowhere, police surrounded us and asked us to go to the station in the pouring rain. Shivering from the cold, I followed them. At the police station, I was surprised to find Emma, a 35-year-old woman, waiting for me. She shared her story of meeting her husband, Bob, at work, getting married, and having a daughter named Lily. Emma, Bob, Lily, and Catherine, my mother-in-law, lived together in a new apartment. They initially rented, but after Catherine's husband passed away and she had knee problems, they bought an apartment for better accessibility. They considered a house but opted for an apartment with an elevator. They made a down payment and took out a 35-year loan. Bob's company doesn't usually transfer employees often, but since we bought our house, they assured us he wouldn't be moved anytime soon. However, he ends up traveling for work almost every week to different states. With a 2-year-old daughter, I get stressed when he's away. Initially, Catherine, my mother-in-law, was helpful, but now she doesn't assist with childcare and even adds to my workload. She leaves dishes around without cleaning them, and even when I ask her to rinse them, she just apologizes without taking action. Interestingly, she rinses the dishes when Bob is around, and I only noticed recently. I used to think it was okay since she occasionally helped, but now I believe she's intentionally making things difficult for me. She also plays games, like asking if I need anything from the store and later saying she actually did. This happens frequently. Despite her knee problems, I wanted to help her, but my willingness to assist is fading. I considered talking to Bob, but I didn't want to stress him more. Catherine's behavior started when we began living together and has continued for years. A friend suggested it might be a form of bullying and advised talking to Bob. However, I feared that involving him could lead to Catherine being placed in a facility since she has no other relatives. I considered enduring it until an event changed my perspective. That day, I had intended to drop off Lily at my parents' place. They adore having Lily over for sleepovers. During our chat, they suggested I stay over sometimes too. Although I'd love to, my concern for leaving Catherine alone held me back. After a brief visit, I decided to head back to the apartment where Catherine was waiting. Upon reaching there, I realized I had left the keys at home. Despite my initial worry, I remembered Catherine was at home, so I rang the intercom. However, there was no response to the room number I dialed. Wondering if she had gone out, I decided to wait outside. 2 hours passed with no sign of Catherine. It was 7 p.m., and darkness had set in. Just then, another resident arrived, and I entered with them. Knowing Catherine rarely went out at night, I was confident she was at home. With that belief, I pressed the intercom button outside our apartment. Though I heard the ding-dong sound, there was still no response. Waiting by the door, I eventually heard a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine's presence. Despite trying the intercom several times, she refused to come out. Feeling defeated, I spent the night at a nearby motel, planning to return when Bob came back from his business trip. What happened? Out shopping, actually. I explained to Bob that Catherine had locked me out. He was rightfully upset on my behalf, but Catherine casually attributed it to her hearing loss, saying, "Maybe I didn't hear because of my hearing. I'm getting old, you know," with a hidden smirk. Glad to be back inside, I grabbed my keys and went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. When I discussed the situation with them, they'd offered support, saying, "Sounds like she's giving you a hard time. If it becomes too much, you're always welcome back here. Remember, you're our precious daughter." Their comforting words brought tears, but I quickly wiped them away in front of Lily and headed home. Things were quiet with Catherine for a while, but suddenly, Bob's permanent international transfer was confirmed. Despite just buying a place, he asked, "What do you think about staying in the U.S.? Can you handle living with my mom?" Unable to answer immediately, considering potential stress for Lily, I eventually decided it would be best for us to stay in the U.S. Shortly after this decision, Bob had to leave for Europe. Though he was concerned, work kept him occupied, so the life of me, Lily, and Catherine was about to begin. Living with Catherine took a turn for the worse once Bob left for Europe. Her attitude changed drastically. On a stormy day, Catherine surprised me with a bombshell. "Now that Bob's gone, wouldn't it be better if you and Lily move out?" Shocked, I asked for clarification, but she insisted, "I'll take over. I can't relax with strangers in the house. Please leave right now." I couldn't believe her audacity. While it's true we aren't blood relatives, I've always tried to make our living together comfortable, treating her like family. Yet to Catherine, it seemed we were merely an afterthought. Considering going back to my parents' place, Catherine urged me to leave immediately. Before I knew it, Lily and I were thrown out, dressed as we were. Despite my pleas, Catherine refused to open the door. Lost and confused, I carried Lily through the pouring rain to a nearby park, hoping its roof would offer some shelter. Ideally, I would have checked into a motel or returned to my parents' place, but I left my wallet and phone inside the house. Feeling helpless, I sat in the park, trying to figure out our next move. Time passed in the torrential downpour, and overwhelmed by fatigue and cold, I began to doze off. It was dark, and despite the summer, the cold was biting. As bad as things were, the only option seemed to be a 3-hour walk to my parents' home. While pondering our situation, I noticed 2 distant lights approaching through the rain. Despite the obscured visibility, I could tell they were police officers. Hoping for help, one of them called out, "Are you Enma? And is this little one Lily?" Surprised they knew our names, I weakly confirmed, "Yes, that's us." The officer then requested, "Please come to the station with us." Perplexed, I questioned, "Why the police station?" Unsure if something was wrong, I complied as they urged Lily and me into the patrol car. We were freezing, but the officers had brought large towels and assured us, "You might need these. We've got spare clothes at the station for you." Curious about how they knew about us and the reason for heading to the police station, I asked, "How did you know where to find us?" Their response was, "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station. For now, just try to relax." Exhausted, I soon dozed off and woke up to find we had arrived at the police station. Inside, to my surprise, I saw Catherine and my uncle. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" He explained that Bob had contacted him. "Bob suspected you might be having issues with his mom, and since he's abroad, he wanted me to keep an eye on things for him." My uncle shared that Bob had talked to him about this issue previously, asking him to keep an eye on things since he couldn't be there himself due to being overseas. He had seen us in the rain earlier and considered taking us in, but Catherine's extreme behavior prompted him to report it to the police. That's how the officers knew our location and came to our aid. Catherine, sitting on a sofa at the police station, glared at me, seemingly unaware of the reason for her presence. She argued, "Why do I have to be here? I have a bad knee. If Bob were here, this wouldn't be happening." Despite her protests, the situation arose from Bob seeking my uncle's help. In discussions with the police, the possibility of legal implications emerged, leading to the suggestion that I consider hiring an attorney. Catherine dismissed it, saying, "An attorney? That's an overreaction. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else." My uncle defended us, highlighting the severity of Catherine throwing us out in torrential rain. He asserted that, in fact, I was the rightful owner of the house. Catherine believed Bob was the owner, but she was mistaken. My uncle, running a real estate business, had arranged a great deal on a condo for us, recommended by Bob. The property was put under my name, a decision I had been indifferent about initially but now appreciated. Following my uncle's counsel, I opted to hire a lawyer. The legal expert conveyed that evicting Catherine would pose challenges, suggesting that placing her in a care facility might be the most feasible solution. Upon learning this, I promptly called Bob to provide an update. Bob, caught off guard by the escalation of the issue, expressed his desire to return from Japan for a thorough discussion. He mentioned considering the option of placing Catherine in a facility. Unaware of these developments, Catherine, still at the police station, casually snacked on crackers. Unable to return home with her, I decided to seek refuge at my parents' place until Bob's return. With Bob expected back in a week, I had some time to contemplate our next steps. If Bob didn't stand by me, divorce seemed like the only recourse. Regret lingered, wishing I had sought advice sooner. A week later, Bob returned from Europe, and I moved back home from my parents' place. Due to the urgency of his return, Bob had limited time in Japan before going back to Europe, so we needed to discuss our next steps. I heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Catherine stubbornly denied any wrongdoing, claiming it was all lies and that I was plotting to evict her. Surprisingly, Bob, who should have supported me, seemed inclined to consider Catherine's perspective. "Do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something?" he asked Catherine. "Evidence? Of course not," she replied. Bob then turned to me, asking if I had any evidence. Being busy with work, I hadn't been able to keep a close eye on things, but I handed Bob a voice recorder I had with me. "What's this?" When Bob played it, he heard recordings of Catherine not only evicting me, but also frequently berating me, calling me a worthless wife. In response, Catherine quickly defended herself, claiming it was taken out of context. Despite Catherine's attempt to downplay her actions, a barrage of recorded verbal abuses played from the voice recorder, revealing numerous instances, some of which weren't even captured. Bob's hand, holding the voice recorder, trembled with tension and anger. Catherine, looking guilt-ridden, claimed, "Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time, but it was just this once." However, the evidence spoke volumes. When Bob questioned her, she remained silent, and as he asserted the need to protect me and Lily, Catherine, probably witnessing this side of Bob for the first time, appeared frightened and speechless. Discussions continued until Bob's return to Europe. I made it clear that I couldn't continue living with Catherine, especially with Lily in the picture, and Bob seemed to share my sentiment, leaning towards placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine strongly opposed the idea, complicating the discussions. Despite her resistance, I decided to sell the house. "You can't stay here anymore. If you don't want the facility, you'll need to find another place." Catherine resisted, refusing to allow the sale of the house, but it was a tough decision to accommodate. Lily and I had resolved to move to Europe, a choice influenced by Bob's regret for not being more present for his family. Though hesitant about living abroad, knowing Bob would be with us provided reassurance. Additionally, Lily, being only 2 years old, would benefit from practicing her communication skills in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, became the only viable option. Leaving it as it was meant Catherine would have to cover the mortgage, an unrealistic expectation given her fixed income. Considering her future needs, someone should be available to assist her. Despite our efforts, Catherine staunchly refused to move into a facility. Consequently, we had to take the step of placing her there against her will. "I'm sorry, but I've got to head back to Europe. Could you handle any required procedures here?" Bob inquired before his departure. With assistance from those around me, I successfully completed the necessary steps for Catherine's admission into the facility. The facility staff kept me informed about her condition, and unfortunately, she wasn't faring well. It would have been different if she were just feeling down, but it appeared she was causing trouble for others in the facility. Before leaving for Europe, I visited her to check on her well-being. However, she lashed out, exclaiming, "What's the big idea? Why have you locked me up in this place?" Her frustrations extended to the staff, complaining about the food, discomfort of the beds, and snide remarks from other residents. When I apologized to the staff, they were understanding. "It's all good," one of them reassured me. "We encounter this behavior often. Leave it to us. We'll keep you updated, and if anything arises, we'll give you a call, so don't worry." Despite enduring harassment from Catherine during our time living together, I couldn't shake off my worries as I headed to Europe. Upon reaching Paris, Bob greeted me at the airport, and we made our way to the apartment we had rented. While it's true that rents in Paris are often higher than in Texas, Bob's housing allowance from the company proved fortunate, allowing us to find a spacious and affordable place. Our neighbors in the building have been incredibly friendly and kind, even though my French isn't fluent. Just yesterday, a neighbor shared wine and cheese, and I reciprocated with some mac and cheese. Meanwhile, I'm gradually learning French alongside my daughter Lily, recognizing the limitations of self-study. I've also enrolled in a language school, where I've made friends with fellow Americans new to France. Life in Paris is truly enjoyable. Back in the States, my constant concern for Catherine often hindered my enjoyment during outings with friends. However, here in Paris, I can savor leisurely lunches without such worries. The only current concern is Lily, who is still too young for kindergarten. Typically, children here start kindergarten at 5, so I hope Lily picks up enough French by then. Thankfully, she seems to be catching on quickly. Once Lily starts preschool, I'm contemplating getting a job. Although Bob is okay with me staying at home, the experience of living in Paris has sparked a desire to explore more opportunities. Making friends with a waitress at a nearby cafe, I learned there might be a job opportunity there. The cafe is not only popular among the American community, but many customers are also learning English. While challenges may arise, our communication has improved since coming to France. I feel more confident expressing my feelings, and no matter what lies ahead, I believe we'll face it as a family. Right now, I'm experiencing a level of happiness I've never felt before. "Get out!" My mother-in-law Catherine's harsh voice pierced the air. When my husband was transferred abroad, she kicked me and my daughter out of the house. With no place to go, I ended up at the park, holding my 2-year-old daughter, feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, police officers surrounded us. "Please come with us," they said. Soaked in the rain and shivering from the cold, I followed them to the police station, where I found an unexpected person waiting for me. "I'm Emma, turning 35 this year. I met my husband Bob at work, and after a year of dating, we got married. I quit my job when we tied the knot, and 2 years ago, our daughter Lily was born. Right now, we all live together with my mother-in-law Catherine. We used to rent, but after Catherine's husband passed and her niece started acting up, we decided to buy a new apartment and live together. We thought about getting a house, but with Catherine's knee issues, we figured it'd be smarter to live where it's easy to get around. Buying an apartment was cheaper and had an elevator, which was a big help. Catherine liked the idea too, so we put money down and got a 35-year loan. Bob's job doesn't move us around much since we bought the place, but he still travels for work about once a week. With a 2-year-old, his trips stress me out. At first, Catherine pitched in with childcare, but now she's not much help. She leaves dishes dirty and utensils unwashed, which piles up extra work for me. When I ask her to help, she promises to do better but doesn't follow through. Oddly enough, she cleans up when Bob's around, and I just noticed that recently. At first, I didn't think much of it when Catherine occasionally rinsed the dishes, but now I see things differently. I suspect she's deliberately making things difficult for me, like when she offers to pick up things from the store, and then conveniently mentions afterward that she actually needed something. This happens a lot. I used to think Catherine's knee problems made moving hard for her, so I wanted to help out as much as possible. But now, my eagerness to assist is wearing thin. I considered talking to Bob about it, but he's already stressed from work, and I didn't want to add to his worries. Catherine's behavior started not long after we moved in together, and it's been going on for years. When I mentioned it to a friend, she said, "Sounds like she's bullying you. Why not talk to Bob? He might be able to help." But if I bring it up with Bob, Catherine, who doesn't have any other family, might end up in a care facility. So I thought maybe it's best to just tough it out. However, something happened one day that made me reconsider. That day, I had arranged to drop off Lily at my parents' house. They'd always loved having her over and often suggested I stay the night too. But I always worried about leaving Catherine alone. After a quick chat with my parents, I headed back to our apartment where Catherine was waiting. But when I got there, I realized I had forgotten the keys. At first, I panicked a bit, but then I remembered Catherine was home. I tried buzzing her through the intercom, but there was no answer. I waited outside, thinking she might have gone out, but she didn't return. As it got darker, I decided to follow another resident into the building. I was sure Catherine wouldn't be out so late, but when I buzzed our apartment again, there was still no response. I waited a while longer, but still nothing. Finally, I heard a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine was home. I kept buzzing the intercom, but she wouldn't answer. Feeling defeated, I booked a room at a nearby motel for the night, planning to sort things out when Bob got back from his trip. I got locked out. I explained to Bob when he asked what happened. He was understandably upset, but Catherine just brushed it off, blaming her hearing and joking about getting old. Relieved to be back inside, I grabbed my keys and went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. They offered their support, saying I could always come back if things got too tough. Their comforting words brought tears to my eyes, but I quickly composed myself before heading home with Lily. For a while, things seemed okay with Catherine. Then, unexpectedly, Bob's international transfer was confirmed. A permanent move, not just a business trip. We just bought a place, and now this international assignment. What should we do? Bob asked me. I hesitated, considering the stress it might bring to Lily, but ultimately decided it was best for us to stay in the U.S. Soon after, Bob had to leave for Europe. Although he was concerned, work kept him occupied, leaving me, Lily, and Catherine to navigate life together. Living with Catherine took a turn for the worse once Bob left for Europe, just as I expected. Her attitude shifted drastically. On a stormy day, when it was unsafe to go outside, Catherine blindsided me with a shocking request. "Now that Bob's away, wouldn't it be best if you and Lily found somewhere else to live?" she said bluntly. "Excuse me? What are you saying?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'd prefer to have the place to myself. I can't relax with strangers around. So if you could leave as soon as possible, that would be great," she replied, showing no remorse. I was stunned by Catherine's nerve. Despite not being blood-related, I had always treated her like family, doing my best to make our living situation comfortable. But to her, it seemed we were just unwanted guests. As I contemplated packing up and returning to my parents' house, Catherine's next words cut deep. "Why are you still here? Just leave already, she demanded, showing no mercy. Before I knew it, Lily and I were standing outside our own home, dressed only for indoors, as Catherine slammed the door shut behind us. No matter how hard I knocked, she refused to open it. Lost and stranded, I took Lily to a nearby park for shelter from the pouring rain. Without my wallet or phone, which were inside the house, I felt utterly helpless, unsure of our next move. Exhausted and freezing, I tried to keep us warm as we huddled together. With nightfall approaching and the cold setting in, I feared we might fall ill. Desperate for help, I considered the long walk to my parents' house, despite the distance. As I weighed our options, I noticed two faint lights in the distance. Squinting through the rain, I realized they were police officers approaching. Before I could decide what to do, one of them called out to me. "Are you Emma? And is this little one Lily?" the officer asked, catching me off guard with his knowledge of our names. I nodded weakly, confirming our identities. "Please come with us to the station," the officer requested, and I couldn't help but wonder why they were taking us there. Lily and I obediently got into the patrol car, grateful for the large towels the officers provided to shield us from the cold and rain. As we shivered in the backseat, I couldn't shake off my curiosity. "How did you know where to find us?" I asked, hoping for some answers. "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station," they assured me. Exhausted, I soon drifted off to sleep, only to awaken later to find ourselves at the police station. Following the officers inside, I was taken aback to see Catherine and my uncle waiting for us. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" I asked in surprise. "Bob contacted me. He suspected you might be having trouble with his mom, especially since he's overseas," my uncle explained, shedding some light on the situation. "He wanted me to keep an eye on things for him," my uncle explained. Apparently, Bob had discussed this issue with him before, expressing his concern about not being able to be there himself while he was overseas. My uncle had spotted us in the rain earlier that day and had considered taking us in himself. However, he found Catherine's actions extreme, so he decided to report it to the police. That's why the officers knew where to find us and came to our rescue. Catherine had also been summoned to the police station, where she sat glaring at me, seemingly unaware of the reason for her presence. "Why do I have to be here? My knee is acting up, you know. If Bob were here, none of this would be happening," Catherine argued. Little did she know that this entire situation had unfolded because of Bob reaching out to my uncle for help. During discussions with the police, it became evident that the situation might have legal implications. As a result, I was advised to consider hiring an attorney to navigate the complexities ahead. An attorney? That's an overreaction. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else, Catherine protested. "Do you even realize what you've done? You threw Emma and a little child out in torrential rain. That's not something forgivable," my uncle defended us, emphasizing the severity of Catherine's actions and asserting my rightful ownership of the house. "That's impossible. Bob is the head of the household. He's the rightful owner. Now that he's not here, it should be mine," Catherine insisted, misunderstanding the ownership status. In truth, my uncle, who works in real estate, had facilitated a great deal on a condo for us, and Bob had recommended putting it under my name. Following my uncle's guidance, I decided to seek legal advice. The lawyer explained that evicting Catherine would be challenging and suggested considering placement in a care facility. I immediately called Bob to update him on the situation. He hadn't anticipated the severity of the issue and expressed his desire to return from Japan to address it properly, considering placing Catherine in a facility. Unaware of the unfolding developments, Catherine, despite being at the police station, nonchalantly snacked on crackers. Unable to return home with Catherine, I sought refuge at my parents' house until Bob's return. With a week before his arrival, I had time to reflect on our options. If Bob wouldn't support me, then divorce seemed the only option, I lamented, regretting my delay in seeking advice. A week later, Bob returned from Europe, and I moved back home from my parents' place. However, His stay was brief as he needed to go back to Europe soon. With limited time in Japan, we had to discuss our next steps. I heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Bob inquired as soon as we were together. Catherine adamantly denied any wrongdoing, insisting it was all lies and accusing me of plotting against her. Surprisingly, Bob seemed inclined to consider Catherine's perspective. Do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? Bob asked, seeking clarity. Evidence? Of course not. Emma, do you have any evidence? I admitted I hadn't been able to keep track of things due to my busy work schedule. Uncertain of whom to believe, I handed Bob a voice recorder I had with me. What's this? Bob questioned as I handed it to him. I explained that it contained recordings of Catherine's harsh words and her eviction of me from the house. As Bob listened to the recordings, he heard Catherine's disparaging remarks about me, questioning why he even married me. Catherine quickly began to defend herself upon hearing the playback. This is taken out of context. Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time. But it was just this once. Catherine attempted to downplay her actions, but the voice recorder played a relentless stream of verbal abuse, revealing countless instances of mistreatment, some not even captured on the device. Bob's hand trembled with tension and anger as he held the recorder, while Catherine appeared guilt-ridden. Mom, what is this about? Bob demanded an explanation, but Catherine remained silent. If you won't answer, then I can only assume this is all true. If so, I need to prioritize Emma and Lily's safety. You understand that, right? Bob's anger was palpable, a side of him I had never seen before. Catherine, seemingly realizing the severity of the situation, cowered in fear, unable to respond. In the ensuing discussions before Bob's return to Europe, I made it clear that I could no longer live with Catherine, especially with Lily in the picture. Bob seemed to agree, leaning towards the idea of placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine vehemently opposed the suggestion, complicating matters further. Regardless, I decided to sell the house, so you can't stay here anymore. If you don't want to go to the facility, you'll need to find another place, Bob announced firmly. How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house. Catherine protested vehemently, but the decision was made. Lily and I had already chosen to move to Europe, as Bob regretted not being more present for his family and was determined to make amends moving forward. Although I had reservations about moving abroad, knowing that Bob would be with us provided some comfort. Plus, I thought it would be beneficial for Lily, who was only 2, to immerse herself in a new environment and practice her communication skills in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, was the only viable option. Leaving it as it was would burden Catherine with the mortgage payments, which she couldn't afford on her fixed income. Considering her future prospects, it was essential for someone to be available to support her. Despite our best efforts, Catherine refused to move into a care facility voluntarily, so we had no choice but to arrange for her admission forcibly. I'm sorry, but I have to head back to Europe. Could you take care of any necessary procedures here? Bob asked before departing. With assistance from friends and family, I managed to complete the process of admitting Catherine into the facility. The staff there kept me informed about her condition, but it seemed she was struggling. While it would be understandable if she were simply feeling down, she was reportedly making things difficult for the staff and other residents. Before leaving for Europe, I visited Catherine to check on her well-being. However, she lashed out at me, accusing me of imprisoning her in the facility. She also vented her frustrations to the staff, criticizing the food, accommodations, and other residents. Despite apologizing to the staff for her behavior, they reassured me, saying they were accustomed to handling such situations. Despite the challenges and the mistreatment I had endured from Catherine during our time living together, I couldn't help but feel anxious as I embarked on my journey to Europe. Upon arriving in Paris, Bob greeted me at the airport, and we made our way to the apartment we had rented. While they say rents in Paris are steep compared to Texas, Bob's company provides a housing allowance, which allowed us to find a spacious and affordable place. Our neighbors in the building have been incredibly welcoming, despite my limited fluency in French. Just yesterday, one neighbor shared some wine and cheese with me, and in return, I offered them some homemade mac and cheese. In the meantime, I'm gradually picking up French alongside my daughter Lily, recognizing the limitations of self-study. I've also enrolled in a language school, where I've met other Americans new to France and formed some great friendships. Back in the States, my worries about Catherine often overshadowed my enjoyment of outings with friends. But here in Paris, I can savor leisurely lunches and fully embrace the city's charm. My main concern now is Lily, who is still too young for kindergarten. Typically, children here start kindergarten at 5, so I'm hopeful she'll pick up enough French by then. Thankfully, Lily seems to be adapting quickly. As Lily grows older and approaches preschool age, I'm considering re-entering the workforce. While Bob supports me staying at home, living in Paris has sparked a desire for new opportunities. Witnessing the ambition and confidence of people here has inspired me. I've even befriended a waitress at a nearby cafe who hinted at a potential job opportunity there. The cafe is popular among both Americans and locals learning English, presenting a promising avenue for me. Despite the challenges ahead, our move to France has strengthened the bond between Bob and me. I feel more empowered to express my feelings, and I'm confident that we'll face whatever comes our way as a family. Right now, I've never felt happier in my life.